Now, before we dive into how System Shock works moment to moment, we have to discuss its base mission as an immersive sim. To do that, I have to describe what an immersive sim is with the Immersive Sim Kitchen. Having to explain what an immersive sim is for every long video about an immersive sim is kind of exhausting. So I've spent plenty of time here on this analogy that I hope to pull this off one final time and just be good. Forever. You are playing a game in a kitchen full of tools and ingredients, far more than you would probably ever see or use outside of a restaurant. With this kitchen, you can use the tools and ingredients in such a way that you can make practically any dish. The ingredients are designed to work together exactly as they would in real life. If you found a recipe on the real-world internet for a cake, then threw together the virtual ingredients and tossed it into the virtual oven for a real amount of time, it would become a good tasting virtual cake as well, judged by some kind of algorithm within the game. The oven would calculate the physics on the molecules of the batter you made, the batter that it calculated from the mixture and ingredient of molecules from the ingredients that you made, and in the end, the game would know that you had made a cake. If you make the recipe wrong, the game knows the cake will fail to grow, or it'll taste weird or bad. You have scads of ingredients to make virtually any dish you want. So if you want to make a pasta, cook a steak, or make a cheesecake, you can do all of this. Now by itself, this is an interesting toy. The game is simulating very complex interactions, and it's immersive because you can summon objectives in your imagination and convert them directly to things you can do in the game. But this also isn't much of a game because there aren't any objectives. There is no beginning outside of when you enter the kitchen, and there is no end beyond quitting the game. So now we put a frame around this. Suppose that before you're in this kitchen, you've just gone on a date, potentially hit it off, which is its own set of simulations, and you've invited them over for dinner the following evening. Just like the real world, you'd have to ask what their dietary preferences are, if they have any allergies, so forth. You don't have all the time in the world to get this done because you also have to work a day job. You have to grab a vital package from the post office, etc. So now you're back in the Immersive Sim Kitchen with an idea about what to make, but aren't quite sure how. If you make the meal successfully to their liking, you get to go on another date. If you don't, the relationship is effectively over. What we've done here is now cranked up the number of games and simulations within this Immersive Sim Kitchen game to replicate reality. We are given an even greater opportunity to integrate our imagination to problem solve, while the game colonizes more of our thought process as we prod out the rules of the game, rather than abiding by the strict objectives of the game designer. Heck, if you screw up a main course half an hour before the date is set to arrive, you might have enough time to still hit up a virtual DoorDash for takeout. This simulation can then expand into nearly infinity as you spend time out in the virtual world promoting your cooking and new recipes at trade shows, even winning over the royal family with your Immersive Sim Kitchen. This game is so complex and so complete that you can take what you learn here as a virtual chef and actually become a star chef in the real world as well. What I've described is, in effect, the perfect immersive sim. It's not hard to imagine how many expansions you could expand this into, whether you go from a virtual toddler to an elderly person, whether your time secretly tinkering with your dad's truck while he's at work lands you a career as a Formula 1 driver years later. It's the perfect game altogether too, the dream stuff of Peter Molyneux. But this game doesn't exist for a variety of logistical reasons. There isn't enough hardware in the universe to calculate all these possibilities and simulate all of these interactions. There is no way to effectively bug test a game with infinite potential. There's no way to produce a game that relies on nearly perfect information. This is, in effect, the kind of action that an immersive sim chases. So how do immersive sims exist then? For one, their scope is far more limited and tied to a pre-existing narrative and 3-act structure or 4-act structure that makes stories work. For two, they cheat. Thief gives you a variety of ways to infiltrate the Ramirez Manor and a number of tools to do it, but you can't move on until you complete your predetermined objectives. What if Garrett doesn't want to humiliate Ramirez after his goons try to assassinate you? Deus Ex fakes the illusion of choice by providing so many inputs and outputs, then stringing them to events that happen later on, generating the notion that you're affecting the world through your own actions as the player, something that other games in the series don't really cash in on. Doug Church once famously called System Shock an inch wide and a mile deep, and Deus Ex a mile wide and an inch deep. System Shock lets you do many, many things, like annihilate mankind accidentally, but you're stuck in the 10 levels of Citadel Station. Deus Ex lets you go many places and interact with many characters, but the decisions you made were not very complex, and neither were their consequences. Church then speculated that he'd love to see a game that was both a mile wide and a mile deep. That game is the Immersive Sim Kitchen. It's the dream of virtual reality, of Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, of Snow Crash, of so much science fiction. For the sake of this review, that must eventually conclude, it's the dream of System Shock as well.